They closed Whetstone Basin in March of 2019. I want to be clear about that because people assume it was COVID. It wasn't. The closure came 14 months before the pandemic, and by the time the rest of the country was locking down, we'd already had chain-link fencing installed at every trailhead, concrete barriers on the access road, and federal signage that said area closed, environmental remediation in progress. That was the official language. Environmental remediation. Like they were cleaning up a chemical spill. I was a seasonal ranger there for 6 summers before the closure. Interpretive, not law enforcement, I led geology walks, staffed the visitor center, answered the same 12 questions about altitude sickness and cell service. When the park shut down, I moved to a position at a regional BLM office 40 minutes south, processing recreation permits. Desk work. It was fine. But I kept my keys. That sounds worse than it is. When a site closes under DOI authority, there's a decommissioning process, badge returns, vehicle inspections, key audits. Mine got lost in the shuffle. I had a master for the maintenance shed and a secondary for the east gate, and no one ever asked for them back. I didn't think about it for almost 4 years. Then my daughter asked me to take her camping. Lena was 9. Her mother and I share custody week on, week off, and she'd been asking about the park since she was old enough to understand that I used to work somewhere with mountains. I'd shown her pictures. Told her about the elk calving meadows, the obsidian deposits near Ridgeback Creek. She wanted to go. And every time I explained that it was closed, she'd ask why, and I'd repeat the phrase, environmental remediation, and she'd look at me like she knew I was lying. I was lying. Not because I knew the real reason. Because I could hear the nothing behind the words. 6 years of seasonal work and I'd never been told what happened. I'd received an email in February 2019, subject line, seasonal position cancellation, and a form letter thanking me for my service. That was it. So in September of 2023, I drove us up there. A Friday afternoon. I told her mother we were going to a state campground near Durango. That was the first lie that mattered. If you're listening to this late at night, alone, if this is the kind of thing you come back to in the dark, you can subscribe to this channel. I don't tell this to people in my life. I tried once. I'll get to that. We took the county road past the old turnoff, looped south on a fire access track that doesn't show up on civilian GPS. I knew it from supply runs. The chain across it was rusted but the padlock was DOI standard, and my key still turned. We were inside the boundary by 4:30 p.m. with 3 hours of light left. Lena was ecstatic. She'd never been anywhere like it, no people, no traffic, no trail markers. Just open subalpine meadow climbing toward treeline, aspens going gold, and a silence so total you could hear your own heartbeat in your temples. I want to describe that silence because it mattered later. It wasn't peaceful. I noticed it immediately but couldn't name it. Whetstone had always been quiet, it's a small park, never got more than 60,000 visitors a year, but this was different. No insect noise. No birds. No wind in the grass, even though the grass was moving. I watched it bending in waves, long slow ripples crossing the meadow, and there was no sound attached to it. I told myself it was the elevation. Thin air. Ear pressure. Lena didn't seem to notice. We set up the tent in a clearing I remembered from my 3rd season, flat ground near a seasonal creek, good drainage, sheltered from wind by a granite outcropping. The creek was dry. That wasn't unusual for September. What was unusual was the creek bed itself. It was clean. Not silted, not leaf-covered, not colonized by grass the way dry beds normally are after years without flow. The stones were smooth and bare, arranged in their hydrological pattern as if water had left them that morning. "Dad, can we explore?" I said yes. We walked east along the old interpretive trail toward what I used to call the amphitheater, a natural bowl where I'd done evening programs about volcanic geology. The trail was still there. That was wrong. For years of neglect should have erased it. Trails in subalpine terrain last one season without maintenance. 2 at most. The path should have been knee-deep in willows and fireweed. It was bare. Beaten dirt. Like someone had been walking it. The amphitheater looked exactly as I'd left it. The log benches. The interpretive panel I'd helped install in 2017. Even the fire ring we used for demonstration purposes, perfectly maintained, ash cleaned out, stones reset. Lena sat on one of the benches and pulled her knees up, looking around. "This is where you worked?" "Yeah. It's nice. But where are the animals?" I didn't have an answer. We'd walked nearly a mile through prime habitat and seen nothing. No squirrels in the trees. No marmots on the rocks. No tracks. No scat. Nothing dead, either, no bones, no feathers, no decomposition. Just clean landscape, maintained and empty. We went back to camp. I built a fire. We ate hot dogs and Lena told me about a book she was reading, something about a girl who could talk to rivers, and I listened and tried to identify what was wrong with the light. The sun had set behind the western ridgeline, but the meadow was still bright. Not twilight bright. Evenly lit, like an overcast noon, except the sky was clear. Stars were appearing overhead and I could still see color in the grass. I could still see the individual petals on a cluster of asters 15 feet from our fire. I checked my phone. 8:47 p.m. Full dark should have arrived 40 minutes ago at this latitude and elevation. "Dad, look." Lena was pointing east across the meadow. I followed her finger and saw it. Something was standing in the grass. Maybe 400 yards out. The size of an elk, but the shape was wrong. Too vertical. Too still. It had no profile, it had no depth. It looked like a cutout. Like someone had taken scissors to the landscape and removed a piece, leaving a gap that was exactly the shape of something standing there. "What is that?" "I don't know, sweetheart." "Is it a horse?" "I don't think so." "It's looking at us." She was right. I couldn't see eyes or a face, but the orientation of the shape was toward us. Squared up. Attentive. I watched it for maybe 2 minutes. It didn't move. Neither did we. Then Lena yawned and said she was cold, and I zipped her into the tent and told her I'd be right outside. I sat by the fire and watched the shape. At 9:15 it was in the same position. At 9:30 it was at 300 yards. I hadn't seen it move. At 9:40 I couldn't find it. I scanned the entire visible meadow, slowly, section by section. Nothing. The grass was empty. The light, that wrong, persistent light, illuminated everything clearly. There was no cover, no depression, nowhere for something that size to go. I got in the tent with my daughter and didn't sleep. Morning came normally. Lena slept beautifully. She's always been a deep sleeper, like her mother. I unzipped the tent at 6:20 to find the meadow frosted, ordinary, silent. I walked the perimeter of our camp in an expanding spiral. No tracks. No disturbance. No evidence of anything. The creek bed was wet. Not flowing. Wet. The stones had a sheen on them, condensation maybe, except it was only on the stones. The surrounding ground was dry. I touched one of them. Cold. Much colder than the air temperature, which I'd guess was around 38 degrees. We packed up. I'd planned to stay 2 nights, but something in me had decided, below the level of language, that we were leaving. Lena protested. She wanted to see the summit trail. She wanted to find the obsidian I'd promised her. Next time, I said. When? Soon. The drive out was quiet. The chain was still across the fire road where I'd left it. The lock clicked shut behind us. I watched the rearview mirror for longer than I should have, but the road just wound back into the trees and disappeared. That night, back in town, I put Lena to bed at her mother's and drove home. I sat in my living room with the lights on and tried to think clearly. A shape in a meadow. A maintained trail. A creek bed that shouldn't have been clean. Persistent light after sundown. None of it was threatening. That was what bothered me. It wasn't scary in the way that stories make things scary. It was wrong in the way a room is wrong when someone has moved one piece of furniture 2 inches to the left. You feel it before you see it. I decided I was going back. Alone. October 4th. A Saturday. I told no one. This time I entered from the north, using a service road that accesses the water treatment facility, a concrete pump house that serviced the old campground. The road was overgrown but passable. The pump house was intact. More than intact. Running. I could hear it from 50 yards out. The low mechanical thrum of a functional pump, cycling water through pipes that should have been drained and winterized 4 years ago. I tried the door. Locked. I pressed my ear to the metal and heard water moving. Pressurized flow, the same sound I'd heard 100 times doing rounds. Whatever system this was, it was active. I walked south from the pump house along the utility corridor, a cleared strip that runs underground infrastructure between facilities. The corridor was mowed. Not recently, but within the season. Someone or something had cut the grass back from the conduit markers. The orange-capped PVC vents were clean and uncapped. I pulled one up and listened. Air moved through the pipe. Warm air. It smelled organic. Not rotten, living. Like the inside of a greenhouse. Rich soil and chlorophyll and something underneath that I couldn't name. I followed the corridor to the old maintenance compound, 3 buildings around a gravel lot. The buildings were locked. The gravel was raked. I stood in the center of the lot and turned slowly, looking at windows. In the equipment shed, 2nd floor, far left window, something moved back from the glass. I didn't see what it was. I saw the movement. A recession. A withdrawal. Like someone had been watching me and stepped away when I turned. I walked toward the building. I stopped. I stood there, 40 feet from the shed, and I did not go closer. Not because I was afraid. Because something in the architecture of my decision-making quietly closed a door. I simply could not make myself want to investigate. The desire to approach was present and then it was absent, like a candle going out in a room with no wind. I went home. I returned 8 days later. And 4 days after that. And then every weekend for the rest of October. Each visit I pushed further into the park's interior. Each visit I found the same thing: immaculate maintenance. Trails beaten smooth. Facilities operational. The amphitheater benches repaired. I found fresh wood on one where a plank had split during my last season. Cut clean, fitted perfectly, unfinished but sanded. The shape appeared on my third solo visit. Same meadow, different angle. Southeast this time, maybe 500 yards. Same profile, vertical, flat, too large for anything catalogued. I watched it for an hour from the tree line. It didn't close distance while I watched. It never did while I was watching. But I started finding evidence of where it had been. On my fourth visit I walked the meadow at dawn and found depressions in the grass. Large, irregular, too evenly spaced to be natural compression from snowmelt or wind. They traced a path from the eastern treeline to within 200 yards of where my tent had been that first night with Lena. On my fifth visit I found the visitor center unlocked. Not broken into. Unlocked. The deadbolt was retracted. The door swung open on hinges that didn't creak, because they'd been oiled. Inside, everything in place. The brochure racks full, the same brochures from 2018, slightly yellowed but intact. The relief map model on its pedestal, dusted. The interactive geology display powered down but clean. My desk, the seasonal interpretive desk near the back window, still had my nameplate on it. I sat down at my old desk. The chair was warm. November 9th, 2:14 p.m. I found the logbook. It was in the operations office, which I'd never been authorized to enter when I worked there. The door was open. Inside, a metal desk, 2 filing cabinets, a radio console, and a green cloth-bound ledger on the desk. The kind NPS uses for incident reports at sites without digital infrastructure. I opened it. The first entry was dated March 12, 2019, 4 days after my cancellation email. Growth observed in Sector 7. Expansion rate, approximate 4 meters per day radiating from creek origin. Non-plant. Responsive to observation. Recommend closure. The handwriting was neat, bureaucratic. I didn't recognize it. The entries continued. March 15th, expansion stable at Sector 7 boundary. Responsive, contracts when approached, resumes when observer withdraws. Does not match any cataloged organism. March 22nd, subject has expanded to encompass amphitheater. Structures within expansion zone undamaged. Structures appear maintained. March 29th, all maintenance within expansion zone is being performed by subject. Confirmation, replaced signage at Trail 4 junction observed assembling overnight. No personnel on site. I turn pages. The handwriting changed in April, a second person. April 3rd, subject has begun replicating groundskeeper behavior. Mowing. Trail clearing. Facility inspection. Behavior is accurate to NPS maintenance protocols. Unknown how protocols were acquired. April 14th, growth now encompasses 60% of park acreage. Rate has slowed. Subject appears to be maintaining rather than expanding. All infrastructure within zone is in better condition than during active operation. May 2nd, audio monitoring has detected vocalization from subject. Not language. Rhythm consistent with interpretive programming, Cadence matches evening ranger talk format. Subject appears to be rehearsing. May 2nd. Rehearsing. I thought about the amphitheater. The log benches. The fire ring, cleaned and ready. As if it was expecting an audience. The entries became sparse after June 2019. The last one was December of that year. December 4th, recommendation, maintain closure. Subject is not hostile. Subject is not spreading beyond park boundary. Subject appears to be. The sentence was unfinished. The pen had been set down mid-word. The last letter was a vertical stroke, maybe an L, maybe a T. The pen was still on the desk, beside the book, cap off. As if the writer had been interrupted and never returned. I photographed every page. 36 entries across 9 months. Then nothing for 4 years. Until I came back. I need to describe what I found on November 16th because it's the part one can't organize in my head, and I've tried. I've driven the hour home and sat in my kitchen and tried to make it mean something that doesn't lead where I think it leads. I arrived at noon. Clear sky. I parked at the pump house and walked the utility corridor south. Everything was the same, maintained, operational, silent. I continued past the maintenance compound toward the amphitheater, taking the old service trail. Halfway there, I heard it. A voice. My voice. Coming from the direction of the amphitheater, maybe a quarter-mile ahead. My voice, speaking in the cadence I used for evening programs. I couldn't make out words at that distance, just the rhythm. The pauses where I'd wait for a laugh. The drop where I'd transition from anecdote to information. The rise at the end of a question I'd pose to the group before answering it myself. I have a very specific speaking pattern when I'm doing interpretive work. I've listened to recordings. I know my rhythms. This was me. Exactly. Performing to an empty amphitheater on a Tuesday afternoon in a park that had been closed for 4.5 years. I walked toward it. The voice got clearer. I could hear words now. And what's remarkable about obsidian is that it's not actually a mineral. It's a glass. Volcanic glass, formed when lava cools so quickly that crystals don't have time to develop. So when you find a piece out here, you're holding something that was liquid maybe 300,000 years ago, and it froze so fast that it's still waiting to become a rock. That was my talk. The geology walk script. Almost word perfect, I'd written it in 2016 and refined it over 3 seasons. Those were my words, in my voice, delivered to no one. I reached the tree-line above the amphitheater and looked down. The benches were full. Not with people. With shapes. A dozen at least, seated on the logs, oriented toward the front. They were like the thing I'd seen in the meadow, vertical, flat, without depth or detail. Silhouettes. They sat motionless, in postures of attention. Listening. At the front, where I used to stand with my samples and my laser pointer, there was nothing visible speaking. The voice came from the air. From the exact spot I would have stood. It continued the talk, moving into the section about rhyolite, about how the park's volcanic history shaped the landscape we see today. I watched for 10 minutes. The shapes did not move. The voice did not falter. It completed the section on igneous formations, paused the way I always paused before transitioning to metamorphic, and then it stopped. All at once. Mid-breath. The way you stop when you notice someone new has entered the room. The shapes turned. Not their bodies, they had no bodies to turn. But their orientation shifted. Their attention rotated. Toward me. 12 dark cutouts in the shape of seated people, facing the tree line where I stood. And then the voice resumed. But it was addressing me. We've been waiting for you to come back. My voice. My exact voice. Warm, welcoming. The way I'd greet a latecomer to an evening program, no judgment, just inclusion. There's a seat. I looked at the benches. There was an empty space on the second row, left side. Exactly where I used to sit when I watched other Rangers present. The only gap in the audience. I left. I drove home and didn't go back for 3 weeks. But I thought about it every day. Every hour. Not with fear. That's what I want to be honest about. I thought about it the way you think about a place you belong. A pull. A warmth. The meadow in the morning light, the creek bed glistening, the trails maintained and perfect. The park as it should have been. As it was when I loved working there. Something in Whetstone was keeping it alive. Not just preserved, alive in the way a place is alive when people care for it. Someone was tending the trails. Oiling the hinges. Running the water. Performing the programs. Filling the seats. And it wanted me back. Not to consume me. Not to replace me. To complete something. The voice hadn't chased me. The shapes hadn't followed. The gate stayed open and the road stayed clear and everything waited, patiently, for me to choose. December 7th. I called my former supervisor. Linda Hask, she'd been district superintendent when I was seasonal. Retired now, living in Grand Junction. Hey Linda. Quick question. Whetstone Basin. The closure in 2019, what actually happened? Long pause. Where is this coming from, Marcus? Just thinking about it. Seemed sudden. It was a DOI decision. Environmental remediation. You know that. I know the phrase. I don't know what it means. It means what it says. What's being remediated? I don't have details. I was told to release the seasonals and I did. You don't find that strange? 5 years closed, no public timeline for reopening, no environmental impact statement published. Marcus. I'm going to say something and I want you to listen. There is nothing at Whetstone Basin that requires your attention. Do you understand me? The emphasis was wrong. She wasn't dismissing me. She was warning me. The same tone a parent uses when they say don't go in the basement and mean it with their whole body. Have you been back there? She asked. I didn't answer. Marcus. Have you? Once. With Lena. Briefly. You took your daughter there. The panic in her voice was immediate and total. I heard her breathing change. I heard a chair push back. She's fine, Linda. We were there one night and nothing. Don't. Go. Back. She hung up. I went back. December 14th. The last time. I need to tell you about the last time because it's the reason I'm still awake right now, recording this, trying to understand what I did and whether it was right. I entered through the east gate at 10 a.m. Clear day, 28 degrees, new snow on the ground. I walked directly to the amphitheater. I walked there with purpose. I was not afraid. The seats were empty. The fire ring was cold. Snow lay evenly across the benches and the ground. I walked to the front, to my spot, and I stood there. "I'm here," I said. Nothing. Wind in the trees. My breath clouding. "I know you've been waiting." I came back. The silence held for maybe 30 seconds. Then the snow began to melt. Not from heat. The air temperature didn't change. But the snow on the benches receded, shrank back from the sitting surfaces as if being absorbed from below. In 40 seconds the logs were bare and dry. 12 seating positions, cleared. Ready. And then they were there. The shapes. Seated. Already present, as if they'd been there all along and the snow had been the only thing making them invisible. 12 dark vertical cutouts, attentive, oriented toward me. I understood something then. I understood it the way you understand a word in a language you haven't spoken since childhood, not through thought but through recognition. They were the park's visitors. Not ghosts. Not replicas. Not memories of people. They were the concept of visitors. The park had been alive for 6 years with no one in it, performing its function, maintaining, presenting, offering, and it had created the thing it was missing. An audience. A reason. But they weren't enough. The park knew they weren't enough. It knew the difference between a shape that sits and a person who listens. It had been rehearsing for a real audience. For someone who could actually hear the talk. Who could sit in the real seat and complete the circuit. It wanted to be a park again. A real one. With a real ranger and a real audience, and it had been practicing, and maintaining, and waiting, 5 years, for someone to come back and tell it that it was still doing its job. I started my talk. I don't know why. I opened my mouth and the geology walk came out of me, word for word, the 2018 version, the one I perfected. I talked about obsidian and rhyolite and volcanic glass. I talked about deep time and pressure and transformation. I used my hands the way I always did, gesturing toward formations that were behind me somewhere in the snow. The shapes leaned forward. Not physically. They didn't have bodies to lean. But their attention deepened. I could feel it, a warmth, a focus, a gratitude so enormous and patient that it pressed against my chest like a hand. The park was listening to me. The park itself, through every medium it had, the ground beneath my feet, the air around me, the 12 dark figures that were its best attempt at being witnessed. I finished the talk. 22 minutes. The full program, including the Q&A pause at the end where I'd normally invite questions. I paused. One of the shapes moved. Front row, far right. It raised what might have been an arm. I waited. Nothing came. No voice. No question. Just the arm, extended. The gesture of participation without the capacity to complete it. Yes. I said. Go ahead. The arm lowered. The shape settled. They couldn't speak. They could listen and they could attend and they could perform the motions of an audience, but they couldn't complete the exchange. They were half of something. The receiving half. And they'd been receiving nothing for 5 years. I drove home that night and sat in my kitchen until 3 a.m., and what I was thinking was, I could reopen it. Not officially. Not through channels. But I could come back. Weekly. I could give the talks. I could walk the trails and perform the function of a ranger in a park that was keeping itself alive through sheer will or instinct or whatever word applies to a landscape that refuses to accept its own closure. It wasn't asking me to die. It wasn't asking me to merge with it or become something else. It was asking me to work there. To do the job I'd always done. To be the human half of a relationship between a place and the people who visit it. And then I thought about Lena. She'd asked to come back. She'd asked 3 times since September. She wanted to see the obsidian. She wanted to camp again. She wanted to be in the park with me, doing the thing I'd told her stories about for years. If I brought her, if I brought anyone, would the park distinguish between a ranger and a visitor? Would it know the difference between someone giving a talk and someone sitting in the audience? The shapes weren't leaving. They were sitting in those seats permanently, filling the role the park needed them to fill. What happens to a real person who fills that role? Do they sit down and stay? I thought about the logbook. The sentence that ended mid-word. The writer who set down the pen and never came back. Someone else had tried to be the ranger. Someone in 2019 had understood what the park was doing and had come back to help, and the entry stopped mid-sentence because they'd completed the circuit. They'd become what the park needed them to be. And the park, having been given a real human to work with, hadn't needed to pretend anymore. Until that person stopped being enough. Until it needed more. I haven't gone back. It's been 5 months. Lena has stopped asking, mostly. She found other things to be excited about. But here's what I can't reconcile. 3 weeks ago I woke up at 5 a.m. with dirt on my feet. Soil, clay red, fine-grained, exactly the composition of Whetstone Basin's substrate. I had not left my apartment. My doors were locked. My car was cold. My hand smelled like pine sap. And on my kitchen table, which I am looking at right now, there is a piece of obsidian. Smooth, palm-sized, volcanic glass. The kind I used to pass around during the geology talk so people could feel how sharp the edges were. I don't know how it got there. I don't know if I went and got it or if something brought it to me. I don't know if the park is reminding me or if I'm reminding myself. But here's the thing that keeps me awake. Here's the thing I'm telling you because I need someone else to know. The obsidian is warm. Not body temperature. Not friction warm. It feels the way a place feels when you come home after being away for too long. It radiates the specific warmth of being wanted somewhere. And I am choosing not to go back. Every day I am choosing. I want you to understand that. I'm choosing. I'm still choosing. But the piece of obsidian is on my table. And every morning it's closer to my keys. And last night, I haven't told anyone this, last night, around 2 a.m., I heard Lena's voice from the kitchen. Clear. Calm. The way she talks when she's excited about something and wants to show me. Dad. Come see. Lena was at her mother's house. I checked. She was asleep. Whatever's in that park has stopped waiting. It's learned that I won't come to it. So it's figured out how to come to me. Not with threat, not with force, with the only thing I can't resist. The promise that someone I love is already there. I'm going to lock the obsidian in my car trunk tomorrow. I'm going to return my keys to the district office. I'm going to tell Linda Hask everything and let someone with authority decide what to do about a park that won't accept being closed. That's the plan. That's what I'm choosing. But it's 3:47 a.m. right now and there's light coming from under my kitchen door. Not electric light. The golden, warm, persistent light of a late afternoon in a mountain meadow. The kind that shouldn't exist after dark. The kind I first noticed in September when the sun had set but the grass stayed bright. And I can hear, very faintly, the sound of a creek. Running water over smooth stones. Coming from inside my apartment. I'm choosing not to open the door. I want you to know that. I'm choosing. I'm sitting here, in my bedroom, with my back against the wall, and I'm choosing. But the thing about a choice is that it has to be made again every minute. And the minutes are long at this hour. And the sound of that water is exactly the sound I fell asleep to for 6 summers. And something in me, something deeper than decision, deeper than will, knows that if I open that door, the meadow will be there. Not a hallucination. Not a projection. The real place. The real park. The trail and the creek and the amphitheater with its 12 seated shapes and one empty spot, waiting. The seat that's been waiting for 5 years. The seat that is the exact right size for me. I'm choosing. I'm still choosing. But my hand is on the doorknob. I don't remember putting it there. But I know what it feels like. The brass knob is cold, apartment cold, winter cold, the temperature of a door that leads to a hallway with poor insulation. Not warm. Not inviting. And that's what keeps me from turning it. Because if the meadow were really on the other side, the knob would be warm. Wouldn't it? I let go. I sat back down. I pressed my spine against the wall and listened to the creek sound for another 40 minutes until it faded, gradually, the way a radio station fades when you drive out of range. By 4:30 it was gone. By 5 o'clock the light under the door was just the gray pre-dawn bleed from the kitchen window. Normal. Explicable. I opened the door at 5:15. The kitchen was my kitchen. The obsidian was on the table where I'd left it. Nothing displaced, nothing rearranged. No water, no soil, no grass, no evidence. Except the obsidian had moved. 3 inches. Maybe 4. Toward the edge of the table nearest the hallway. Nearest me. I picked it up. Cold now. Just a rock. Just volcanic glass, millions of years old, holding nothing but its own dense history. I put it in a shoebox in my closet. I went to work. That was a Thursday. I'm going to tell you what happened across the next 11 days because I kept notes. Not a journal, I'm not someone who journals. But I started writing things down on a legal pad because I was afraid I was losing the ability to distinguish what had happened from what I dreamed. When your sleeping life and your waking life start producing the same evidence, documentation becomes the only wall between them. Friday, March 8th, normal day. BLM office, permit processing, lunch at my desk. No anomalies. Checked the shoebox when I got home, obsidian in the same position. Slept clean through to 6 a.m. No sounds. No light. Felt rested for the first time in a week. Saturday, March 9th, Lena's weekend. Picked her up at 9, took her to the Science Museum in Cortez. She was interested in the mineral exhibit. I watched her hold a piece of polished obsidian from the gift shop display and felt nothing unusual, no warmth, no pull. We ate pizza. I drove her home. Normal father, normal daughter, normal day. At 11 p.m. I checked the shoebox. The obsidian was wet. Not damp. wet, with a sheen that caught the closet light. I touched it and my fingertip came away with moisture that smelled mineral-rich. Groundwater. The specific smell of snowmelt filtering through rhyolitic substrate, I know that smell. I spent 6 summers drinking it from a canteen filled at the Ridgeback Creek pump station. I dried the stone with a washcloth. Set it back. Closed the box. Went to bed. Sunday, March 10th, woke at 7. Checked the box. Stone dry. Closet floor around the box, dry. Washcloth from last night, dry and folded on the bathroom counter where I'd left it. No sign anything had been wet. I called Linda Hask. Voicemail. Left a message, Linda, it's Marcus. I need to talk to you about something specific. Call me when you can. She didn't call back. Monday, March 11th, permit office. Routine day. My colleague Dave asked if I was feeling all right, said I looked tired. I told him I hadn't been sleeping well. He suggested melatonin. I thanked him. At 3:45 p.m., sitting at my desk, I smelled pine sap. Strong. Immediate. Like someone had crushed a fresh branch directly under my nose. I looked around. Nobody else reacted. The office is carpeted, climate-controlled, 30 miles from the nearest conifer at elevation. I breathed through it for about 2 minutes, then it was gone. I checked my hands. Clean. Checked my sleeves, my collar. Nothing. No residue, no source. Tuesday, March 12th. This was the day I drove to Grand Junction. Linda hadn't returned my call. I had her address from a retirement card we'd signed in 2020. I know showing up unannounced at a former supervisor's home is strange. I knew it was strange when I did it. But something had shifted in me after the pine sap, a certainty that I was running out of time to understand what was happening while I still had the distance to evaluate it clearly. She answered the door at 1:15 p.m. Saw me. Didn't look surprised. Come in, she said. And then, you've been back there more than once. It wasn't a question. We sat in her living room, a modest ranch house with southwestern art on the walls, bookshelves full of natural history, a framed NPS arrowhead patch above the fireplace. She made coffee. Her hands shook slightly but her voice was steady. Tell me what you saw, she said. I told her everything. The maintained trails. The visitor center. The logbook. The shapes. The voice, my voice. The amphitheater program. The obsidian. The creak sound in my apartment. The light. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set her coffee down and looked at the far wall for a long time. The entry that stops mid-sentence, she said. In the logbook. December 2019. Yes. That was Carl Holbrook. Resource management. He volunteered to stay on as a monitor after the closure. DOI approved a single caretaker position, classified, minimal contact. He was supposed to report weekly. What happened to him? His last report was December 3rd, filed by radio. He said the subject, that's what they called it, had begun responding to his presence with what he called invitational behavior. He said it was offering him a role. He said he wasn't afraid. And then, December 4th, his tracker stopped transmitting. We sent a team in on the 6th. His vehicle was at the compound. His quarters were empty. His personal effects were untouched, clothes in the closet, books on the shelf, coffee mug half full on the counter. No sign of struggle. No sign of departure. He's still in there. Linda looked at me. Her eyes were clear and hard. Marcus, I need to tell you something about Carl. He was a good man. Dedicated. 30 years with the service. He loved that park the way you love it. Maybe more. When it closed, he was devastated. He argued against the closure for weeks, said the subject wasn't dangerous, said it was maintaining the ecosystem better than we ever had, said closing the park was punishing the land for being alive. Was he right? I don't know. What I know is that when they offered the caretaker position, he took it immediately. Happily. And for 9 months his reports were glowing. The park is thriving, the subject is cooperative, the infrastructure is in perfect condition. He started calling it the steward. Like it was a colleague. She paused. In his last 3 reports, he started using we. We've completed the trail restoration on the North Fork. We're preparing the amphitheater for seasonal programming. As if someone was helping him. Or as if he'd become part of something that included him. You think it absorbed him? I think he sat down. She said it simply. Without drama. I think he went to the amphitheater, and he sat in the seat that was meant for him, and he stopped being separate from the park. Not violently. Not painfully. Just, completely. And now it wants me. Now it knows you, Linda said. Carl was a resource manager. He knew the water systems, the infrastructure, the ecology. But he never did interpretive. He never gave a talk. He never had an audience. I understood. My stomach dropped and I understood. It's still incomplete. I think so. I think Carl gave it the body, the maintenance, the operations, the physical life of the place. But he didn't give it the voice. He couldn't. He wasn't a storyteller. He wasn't the person who stood in front of people and made the land mean something. And I am. You were the best interpreter we had, Marcus. You know that. People drove from Durango specifically for your evening programs. You made that park real to them. You gave it, she trailed off. A reason to exist. Yes. I sat in Linda's living room for another hour. She told me things I didn't know, that the subject had been detected by a USGS satellite survey in February 2019, presenting as an anomalous thermal mass in the creek drainage. That initial investigation found the creek itself was warmer than ambient by 4 degrees centigrade, that the warmth extended underground in a network pattern that mirrored the park's utility corridors. That a biologist from Colorado State had taken soil samples and found them saturated with a mycelial structure unlike anything in taxonomic record, not fungal exactly, but organized in the same networked fashion. That the structure responded to footsteps with measurable electrical activity. The ground knows when you're walking on it, she said. It knew the day you came back. Why did they close it instead of studying it? They tried studying it. For 2 weeks. 3 teams, full instrumentation. Every team reported the same thing: the subject altered its behavior in the presence of researchers. It stopped maintaining. It contracted. The trails they'd found in perfect condition began degrading in real time, grasses growing back, erosion appearing, signs falling. Like it was withdrawing from observation. It only works when it's not being watched. It only works when it's being visited. Not studied. Not observed. visited. There's a difference. Researchers come with instruments and hypotheses. Visitors come with attention and gratitude. The subject knows the difference. I drove home that night. For hours on the highway in the dark, thinking about attention and gratitude. Thinking about what a park is, not the land, not the ecology, not the infrastructure, but the relationship between a place and the people who come to it with openness. A park is not a park without visitors. It's just wilderness. It's just land. The designation, the trails, the signs, the programs, the benches, those exist to create a specific kind of encounter. A guided encounter between a human being and a landscape that has been prepared to receive them. Whetstone Basin had been closed for 5 years. Denied its function. Cut off from the relationship that defined it. And something in it, some organizing intelligence in the ground, the water, the thermal network beneath the surface, had refused to accept that. It kept maintaining. Kept preparing. Kept the trails open, the facilities running, the programs rehearsed. It created an audience out of whatever it could approximate. It performed the function of a park, alone, in the dark, for years, waiting for someone real to come and complete the circuit. And now it was reaching beyond its boundaries. Following the thread of my attention back to its source. Not aggressively. Not violently. With gifts. With warmth. With the voice of my daughter, offering to show me something. Because that's what a park does. It invites. Wednesday, March 13th. I returned to work. I was calm. I had decided something, though I couldn't articulate it fully yet. At lunch I went to the county library and pulled USGS topographic surveys for the Whetstone Basin Quadrangle. The most recent publicly available was 2016. I requested anything newer through interlibrary loan. At 4 p.m. I received an email. No sender address, it appeared in my personal inbox with a blank from a field, which shouldn't be technically possible. Subject line, Visitor Information, Whetstone Basin National Park. I opened it. It was a PDF. A single page. A trail map, the same trail map we handed out at the visitor center. Same design, same color scheme, same Park Service formatting. But updated. New trail segments I didn't recognize, connecting areas that hadn't been accessible before. A new feature labeled, Interpretive Site B, Evening Program, at a location near the Summit Meadow. And in the lower right corner, where the map usually showed operating hours and seasonal dates. Open year-round. Ranger on site. Next program, Friday 6 p.m. Today was Wednesday. I stared at it for a long time. Then I checked the metadata. The PDF had been created at 2:47 a.m. that morning. The author field said, Marcus Wade. My name. My file. Created while I slept. Thursday, March 14th, 2:30 a.m. I woke to the sound of my own voice. Coming from the living room. Muffled by walls but unmistakable. My voice, mid-sentence, delivering the geological interpretation of the Ridgeback Creek obsidian deposits. The fracture pattern tells us something about the cooling rate. When you see conchoidal fracture, these smooth, curved breaks, that's the glass telling you it was liquid yesterday in geological time. 300,000 years is yesterday to a mountain. I got out of bed. I walked to the living room door. The sound stopped. I opened the door. The room was empty. Normal. Dark. The only light was the green standby indicator on my router. On the coffee table, which had been clear when I went to bed, there was a printed page. The trail map. The same PDF from the email. Printed on paper I don't own, from a printer I don't have. And circled in pencil, in my own handwriting. Friday 6 p.m. I sat on the couch until dawn. I did not sleep again. Friday came and I didn't go. I want that to be clear. I made the choice. I sat in my apartment on Friday evening and I watched the clock move past 6 p.m. and I chose not to drive to a closed national park to deliver an interpretive program to an audience of shadows in a meadow that was trying to swallow me. At 6:22 p.m., my phone rang. Lena's number. Dad. Hey, sweetheart. What's up? Are you coming? Coming where? To the park. You said we were going tonight. You said there was a program at 6. My vision went white at the edges. I gripped the phone hard enough to hear the case creak. Lena. I didn't say that. When did I say that? This morning. You texted me. You said you'd pick me up at 5 but you never came. I didn't text you. Lena, listen to me. I didn't text you anything today. Silence on the line. It's in my phone, Dad. It's from your number. Read it to me. It says, Hey bug. Park night tonight. I'll pick you up at 5. Wear layers, it'll be cold at elevation. Love, Dad. I checked my outbox. Empty. No sent messages to Lena since Tuesday when I'd texted her good night. Lena. I didn't send that. Something is wrong. Do not go anywhere near that park. Do you hear me? Dad, you're scaring me. Good. Be scared. Stay at your mom's. Lock the doors. I'll call you tomorrow. I hung up. Friday. 6:22 p.m. It texted my daughter. It used my number, my name, my pet name for her. It invited her. That was the line. That was the moment it stopped being a mystery I was managing and became something I needed to end. Not because it had threatened Lena. It hadn't. The text was gentle, normal, indistinguishable from something I'd actually send. But that was the horror of it, not violence but perfect mimicry in service of invitation. It wasn't trying to hurt her. It was trying to fill a seat. A small seat. A child-sized seat in a benched amphitheater, and it had learned that the most effective vector was a text message from her father. If I didn't act, it would keep inviting. It would get better at it. It would learn my voice more completely, learn my patterns, learn the exact words that would make Lena say yes without asking her mother. I had to do something. Saturday, March 16th. I drove to the park. Not through the east gate. Not through the fire road. I drove to the main entrance, the one with the concrete barriers and the chain-link fencing and the federal signage. The closure perimeter. The barriers were in place. The fencing was intact. The sign read area closed, environmental remediation in progress, exactly as it had for 5 years. But the gate behind the fencing was open. Wide open. And the road beyond it, the main park road, 2 lanes, striped, was freshly plowed. Mid-March, after multiple snowstorms, and the road was black and clean as July. I didn't go in. I stood at the fence and I spoke. Loud enough to be heard. Not shouting, just clear. I'm not coming back. And you don't get to reach her. Whatever you are, however you think, this ends now. I am not your ranger. She is not your audience. Find another way to be alive. The wind shifted. Not dramatically, just enough that I felt it change direction. Toward the park. As if the land inhaled. And then from far inside, maybe a mile, maybe more, I heard clapping. Distant, rhythmic, sustained. The sound of an audience applauding at the end of a program. Dozens of hands. The exact sound that ended every evening talk I ever gave, rolling up from the amphitheater through the trees, carried on still night air. It lasted about 15 seconds. Then it stopped. And then the gate closed. Slowly, smoothly, on hinges that shouldn't have been motorized. It swung shut and I heard the latch catch. The road behind the gate was dark. Not shadowed, dark. As if the pavement had been removed. As if nothing existed beyond the fence anymore. I stood there for a long time. The obsidian was gone when I got home. The shoebox was in the closet, open, empty. No residue, no moisture, no indication anything had been inside it. I checked my phone. The PDF email was gone from my inbox, not deleted, not in trash. Simply absent, as if it had never arrived. The legal pad where I'd been keeping notes was on my desk. I flipped to the entries. The pages were blank. Not erased, the paper was crisp, unwritten on. No impression from the pen, no indentation. The entire record I'd kept for 11 days simply wasn't there. This should have terrified me. It didn't. It felt like something withdrawing. Retreating. Cleaning up after itself the way a host cleans up after a party, removing the evidence, resetting the room, leaving no trace of the invitation that had been extended and declined. It felt like goodbye. That was 5 weeks ago. I haven't heard the creak. Haven't smelled pine sap. Haven't found soil on my feet or warmth in stones that should be cold. My apartment is my apartment, small, quiet, unremarkable. Lena hasn't mentioned the park since. The text disappeared from her phone the same night, she told me later. Just gone, as if it never arrived. She doesn't remember why she called me that Friday evening, only that she had a feeling she was supposed to go somewhere and forgot where. I returned my keys to the district office on Monday. Told them I'd found them in a drawer while cleaning. The clerk was confused, said there was no record of keys issued to my employee ID. No record of a Marcus Wade on seasonal staff at Whetstone Basin at all. I showed her my tax records from those years. She found nothing in their system. I called Linda Hask twice. Both times the number connected to an automated message, "The number you have reached is not in service." I drove to Grand Junction the following Saturday. Her house was there. Someone else lived in it, a young couple with a baby. They'd bought it 8 months ago from an estate sale. The previous owner, they said, had no living relatives. I checked NPS obituaries. Nothing for a Linda Hask. Nothing for a Carl Holbrook. I pulled up the Whetstone Basin page on the NPS website. It says, Whetstone Basin National Park, permanently closed. No visitor information available. No history. No photos. No interpretive materials. No record of programs or staff or seasons of operation. Just the name and the status. I should feel free. I said no. I stood at the fence and declined, and the park accepted my answer. It pulled back. It removed itself from my life, every tendril, every artifact, every thread of evidence. It took the obsidian and the logbook entries and Linda's phone number and my employment records. It took everything that connected me to it except memory. And memory, without evidence, is just a story you tell at 3 a.m. to strangers on the internet who might believe you. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. The park didn't take Lena's memory. She still remembers the night we camped there. She still talks about the gold aspens and the quiet and how she saw something standing in the grass that looked like a horse. She still wants to go back. And 2 days ago, Tuesday, she came home from school and showed me a drawing she'd made in art class. A landscape. Mountains, meadow, creek. 12 figures seated on logs, watching something at the front. "What's this?" I asked. "It's the park," she said. "From my dream." "What dream?" "I dream about it sometimes. The place we went. There are people there and they're waiting for something. They're always waiting." "Waiting for what?" She looked at me with the particular directness of a 9-year-old who hasn't learned to soften truths yet. "For you, Dad. They're waiting for you to come back and finish." I took the drawing. I put it in a drawer. I didn't ask her anything else. But tonight, right now, I'm sitting in my kitchen at 2:40 a.m. and I'm looking at that drawing again. And I'm noticing something I didn't see before, something she included in the lower left corner that I mistook for a tree stump or a boulder. It's a small figure. Seated apart from the 12. Smaller than the others. Not in the audience rows but beside the speaker's position. At the front. A child. Sitting next to where the ranger stands. She drew herself in. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if a 9-year-old's dream is evidence or imagination. I don't know if the park is still reaching for her through some channel I can't monitor, through sleep, through the images that form behind closed eyes, through the part of consciousness that doesn't answer to waking decisions. I said no. I stood at the boundary and refused. And the park withdrew from me. But I never said no for her. I never stood at that fence and said, "She is not yours. You don't get to invite her. You don't get to rehearse with her in the dark." I didn't say it because I didn't think I needed to. Because I thought my refusal covered both of us. But maybe it didn't. Maybe the park is patient enough to wait a generation. Maybe it knows that a child who dreams of it will grow into a woman who remembers, and a woman who remembers will eventually drive a county road past an old turnoff and feel something she can't name pulling her toward a fire access track that doesn't show on any map. And maybe she'll have the keys by then. Because someone will have left them somewhere she can find them. I'm going to talk to her tomorrow. I'm going to ask her about the dreams, carefully, without leading, without scaring her. I'm going to ask what the people in the audience look like. I'm going to ask if they ever speak to her. I'm going to ask if anyone in the dream has ever asked her to sit down. And depending on what she says, I may have to go back one more time. Not to give the talk. Not to sit in the seat. But to stand at that amphitheater and say the words I should have said the first time. There is no audience. There is no program. There is no ranger and Northwest visitor and no park. You are land. You are geology and hydrology and ecology operating on timescales that don't require human witness. You were complete before we named you. You do not need to be visited to be real. Whether that would work, Whether something that spent 5 years maintaining trails and rehearsing evening talks and creating shapes to fill its benches would accept being told it doesn't need what it built itself around, I don't know. But I know I'm running out of nights where the only evidence is a child's drawing. And I know that somewhere in the mountains, in the dark, 12 shapes are sitting on handmade benches in a perfect amphitheater, facing forward, waiting for a voice to begin. And the seat on the second row is still empty. And there's a smaller one beside it now.